Houston, it's rodeo time. Your local Tacova store is the place to go for the finest handmade cowboy boots, jeans, belts, cowboy hats, and apparel for men and women. If you've never owned boots before, let them help you get your first pair like they did for me. Stop by one of your local Houston Tacova stores and get ready for the rodeo with their understated approach to Western. Whether it's your first rodeo or you're a seasoned pro, your local Tacova store is the place to go for rodeo season. Tacovas, don't go gently. Today on CityCast Houston, after 8 years of heated drama, Mayor Whitmire might have finally solved a long-standing issue within the city. Plus, you won't believe what a local middle school teacher showed during a presentation. And one of the staples of the Houston art scene could be going away. Hey, Houston newsletter editor Brooke Lewis joins me to talk about these stories and more to start your week. It's Tuesday, March 5th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Brooke, good morning. Before we start, I just want to remind everyone today is election day, so go vote in the primaries. All right, I want to get that out of the way just to let everyone know. So in case you have forgotten for whatever reason, but good morning, Brooke. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you, Raheel?
I'm doing all right. I wish I was doing better because I have brought great shame to CityCast Houston over the weekend, Brooke. I competed in the celebrity goat milking competition, but I think it's called the goat dairy competition. I don't know. They renamed it. Anyways, it's a bunch of local celebrities who get to go milk goats, and the winner gets a really cool trophy. I didn't even get past my heat. There were 20 celebrities there. I was in the fourth heat. So I was the fourth person milking this poor goat, and I did not do well. It was not good. I finished third in my heat. I was embarrassed because I really wanted to win it. I wanted that trophy. Man, it was a lot of fun, though.
Oh, man. But I mean, at least you represented CityCast. This is like the most Houston thing I've ever heard. A goat milking competition with other local Houston celebrities. Like that sentence alone is so Houston. I love it.
It's so Houston. It is Houston rodeo to the core. I did have a chance to go around and try some of the great food and wild creations that Dominic made. And I put that reel up on Instagram. So just go look at it on CityCast Houston's Instagram, which is linked in the show notes. You also had a chance to go to the rodeo, right? This is our first weekend there. Tell me some of your adventures.
I did. And I got to go back to back, which is an adventure in itself. But on Thursday, I saw For King and Country, which is like a Christian contemporary band. They were awesome. It was a really moving performance, and I just really had such a great time. And Friday, though, was totally different vibe. Black Heritage Day, got to see 50 Cent. I also lost my cowboy hat. So now I'm like our producer, Carly, as I was on the shuttle from the parking lot to the rodeo grounds, my pink cowboy hat flew off. And someone tried to get it for me, but we just couldn't reunite. There were too many people. So I lost my pink cowboy hat, guys. I don't know if that's like a rodeo rite of passage or what, but that's what happened.
Oh, no, man, that is not fun. I saw so many hats for purchase there at the rodeo. It's incredible how many vendors are out there. It is wild. I'm sorry you lost your hat, but you're right. That is a rite of passage. So you're officially a Houstonian now, even though you are a Houstonian, but now like you've got 3 stamps, so you're good.
Totally.
Well, let's get to our biggest stories to start the week. Why don't you kick it off?
Yeah. So this story really is close to my heart because not only did I teach 4th grade creative writing at one point a couple years ago, but this was also my favorite test. I think because I'm a writer, this was probably not anybody else's favorite test. But it made me really sad to hear that last year, almost half of 4th graders in Texas scored a 0 on the STAR writing competition test, which is really a jarring stat. And it's mainly because the STAR test had a complete redesign. And in the past, only 4th graders and 7th graders were the ones that took the test. But now it's included at every grade level. And so the STAR 2.0 redesign also included a complete shift to online testing, which was different from the traditional paper exam that students are normally used to taking. And they changed the questions up a little bit, which I'll talk about in a minute. But because of those changes, about 46% of fourth graders scored a 0 out of 10, 20% in seventh grade, and 25% in high school, which is just really sad because I think it's showing, how COVID affected some of the writing in our schools and also just how these tests are really kind of affecting students, not in the best way, in a negative way.
So yeah, give me some of these examples because I don't think a lot of listeners know unless you have kids in third, fourth, fifth grade right now that are prepping for the STAR test, which I do, and I've looked at some of my daughter's prep questions, and it is wild. But give me some of the prep questions that the fourth graders are taking.
Yeah, so this is a really good example. So before the redesign, fourth graders were given this quote: good teachers know how to bring out the best in students. And then they had to write a writing prompt that said, write about the best teacher you know. But last year, it changed up to they had to read a passage about salamanders, Barton Springs, and the Edwards Aquifer. And then they had to write about the importance of the aquifer, which honestly, that sounds hard to me as a 31-year-old woman. So I can tell that those questions definitely change. And I think some teachers are worried about the creativity for their students because when you're responding to a prompt about, your favorite teacher, that can spawn a lot of different answers. I think when you're responding to something that is more generalized for the students, it's not as creative, and who knows how that could affect them going down the line in their education.
So two things here. One, I understand your point of like the creative side of it, right? And I love those prompts because it really makes the student think about what's happening and they have to use their creativity to come to a conclusion in writing. But I like this more practical approach. And especially as I've been helping my daughter with the online testing, that's the one thing as well. Online is so much different. Like you have
Yes.
to read
Yes.
online, then you have to write on the paper. It's hard. But this makes more practical sense in terms of what they do in school, right? Like they'll read a passage, you have to summarize it, you have to do a report. So I do like that part of it. And it is a little bit easier to drill and understand for a child, in my opinion, right? Like just going through this, than it is like, no, be more creative. Like, what does that mean to them, right? It's a little bit harder.
Yeah, but I just think oh man, just as someone who taught the creative writing to the fourth graders, they came up with some of the most funny, entertaining,
Yeah.
engaging stories whenever I would come up with writing prompts for them. And it just made me so happy. So I just don't want that to go away. I hope there's a way that we can have a balance where, maybe the test is a little bit more generalized. It helps the students, but teachers are still able to teach some of those creative writing prompts because even thinking back to school growing up, seventh grade, I remember my teacher, he had great creative writing prompts, and even in fourth grade. So I'm just hoping that it doesn't go away. But this just shows, y'all, I'm a writing nerd.
As you've mentioned, the writing scores aren't good, but overall, it is important to note that the increase in zeros on writing compositions don't necessarily mean an increase in the number of students who failed the STAR. For example, 78% of fourth graders passed the RLA STAR last year compared to 77% the year before, which was before the redesign. So just because they're failing this portion doesn't mean they're failing the test overall. And the test is also different in that we think like 70% is passing, right? In the STAR test, it's a different grading measurement. So it's almost like half of the questions need to be right and you move on to the next grade, right? So there's also a reframing of grades as well. This is just more of an understanding of what do they know? Are they ready for the next grade? So I did want to point that out before we move on. So it's an interesting story. And by the way, Houston Public Media had that story. Okay, Brooke, my biggest story of the week, Mayor Whitmire promised he would get a deal done with the firefighters union, and he has delivered after the city of Houston and the union reached a deal that will now need approval by a judge. But once that is done, the deal should be good to go. This dispute has been going on for 8 years. I mean, like literally as long as I can remember, right? Like the firefighters union versus the city has been such a big deal. But we kind of figured something would get done when the firefighters union endorsed Mayor Whitmire's campaign for mayor, and now he has gotten it done. And Mayor Whitmire said, quote, "A world-class city like Houston deserves a well-funded fire department to attract and retain talented individuals who are willing to risk their safety for us during our time of need. And this agreement resolves a long festering pay dispute with firefighters, avoids further unnecessary litigation costs, and allows us to move forward together." So still needs to be signed and make it official. But right now, in principle, there looks like there is a deal, which is, you know what, kind of shocking because I didn't think it would get done.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And I just think it's unfathomable that the firefighters have gone without a contract this long and just that there hasn't been a way for them to reach any kind of agreement until now. And it really did take a new administration. Sounds like they're finally happy, but I just can't believe it took this long, that many years.
Yep. Now, I know a lot of people are upset about Mayor Whitmire, about the Houston Avenue median and, overturning that. But look, he is getting stuff done as of right now. And we'll see how much more aggressive he's going to be and if he is going to be about that action. And looks like so far he is. Man, I can't believe it. And he said he was going to get it done before March, and he sure did. So let's see if it all works out. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit more back and forth here, but everything looks like it's heading in the right direction. So good start to the week for the firefighters union and the city.
This new year, it's time to do wellness on your terms. That's where Ollie comes in. Thanks to their delightful gummies, you can actually get a good night's sleep. And you might finally stand a chance of staying focused. Because this is the year of you. Discover Ollie vitamins and supplements. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Shipping can make or break a sale, so optimize how you ship your orders with ShipStation. They make it easy to automate and manage orders no matter how big your business grows. And they might even be able to help reduce shipping and warehouse costs. So optimize and keep up your momentum for growth with ShipStation. Sign up for your free 60-day trial now at ShipStation.com and use the code POD. That's ShipStation.com with the code POD.
Brooke, let's do some rapid fire stories. I want to start with a couple of serious ones. And this one is more of a personal story because I can't believe how incredibly dangerous this is. But a teacher in Fort Settlement Middle School, which is part of Fort Bend ISD, which is one of the most diverse school districts in Texas, if not the most diverse one, put up an offensive slide in a sixth grade social studies lesson about the Middle East. And here's what happened. They were talking about what's in the Middle East, and then one slide came up talking about the 9/11 attacks. The offensive part was putting the Quran, which is the holy book for Muslims, in the middle of the slide with terrorists and pictures of the attacks. Now, Fort Settlement is made up of 63% Asians and so many Muslims. There's no official number because they don't look at what religion you are in schools. But I can tell you, just knowing a lot of parents in Fort Settlement Middle School, and my parents live in that zoned area, there are a lot of South Asians, Muslims, and such a diverse community. Now, I understand you have to learn about the terror attacks, but when you're learning about a region, can you keep it positive, right? And ABC 13 had this story. Pooja Lodia actually reported on this. And she was talking to a couple of parents who grew up in a post 9/11 world. I was in high school when 9/11 happened, right? And I've gotten so many, terrorist jokes and Muslim jokes and all that stuff growing up. So to put this slide up when you're in middle school, kids are going to make fun of other kids. There are, students wearing hijabs. There are students who are practicing openly Muslim. They're proud of it. And you put a slide like this up, it just frustrates me because it creates a culture of bullying, of getting made fun of for unnecessary reasons. I understand you have to talk about what happened on 9/11, right? But do it with a little bit more taste. Here's the other part of this. The teacher was not disciplined. So Fort Settlement Middle School is like, look, she made a mistake or he made a mistake. They didn't say who the teacher was. But you have to understand, like, this has consequences and it's frustrating. And the people in the story were talking about that. Like, now my kids are going to get made fun of, right? And we don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I bet it will. Just somebody who's lived through it. Yes, it will. So that happened, and it was just heartbreaking. And it's also wild to see teachers who should be, a little bit more poised, a little bit more aware about stuff like this, just openly doing it.
It's sad that the same stereotypes of 9/11 are still playing out 20 years later in our classrooms. And I think kids remember those moments because I even think about being in history classes in high school. And a lot of times I was one of the few minorities. And sometimes if a teacher taught something, insensitively about, Black history, sometimes the students would look at me and it would be a really uncomfortable moment. And I think that like, as much as they have kind of tried to move on and forget about it, like that's something that will stay with the students that were affected by it in the classroom. And so they just need to do a better job going forward. And I think there's a way to teach about history without bringing in stereotypes or like politicizing it. There's just a better way.
Absolutely, Brooke. And that was perfectly said. So here's our second story. Things are about to get really messy in the courts because SB 4, which is a law that makes it a state crime to enter Texas illegally, was temporarily blocked by U.S. District Judge David Esra, who issued a preliminary injunction preventing SB 4 from taking effect on the grounds that immigration enforcement falls to the federal government. Then that ruling was reversed by the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. The New Orleans-based appeals court immediately paused its order for 7 days to give the federal government time to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, if the higher court doesn't intervene, the new law could go into effect on Saturday as the legal battle continues. Now, we all know this is Governor Abbott's big law. He pushed for it. In a statement Thursday, he said, Texas will not back down. Texas has the right to defend itself because of President Biden's ongoing failure to fulfill his duty to protect our state from the invasion at our southern border. It's about to get messy in the courts, and this is going to be a back and forth. The law was supposed to go into effect on March 5th, which is today. It is not going to go into effect, but Governor Abbott is not backing down.
Yeah, it just seems like this is an issue that Abbott's not going to let go. So I think it's going to take a lot for this issue to settle down. And it's just been ongoing. Think about it. Since the summer, we've been hearing about what's been going on at the border and just how bad it's gotten. But also, there's just a way for, I think, Abbott and the federal government to come to some kind of consensus on this instead of it just going back in the courts and him appealing it and then them blocking it. It's just, there's a better way.
Yeah. Again, this goes back to if people really wanted solutions, they could find a solution, right? And it almost seems like everybody just wants this in the news, especially the conservative side, right? Like they just want to keep doing this. And nothing will get done until one side says, you know what, we want solutions. And then the other side says, yeah, you know what, we do too. So let's get this done. But again, it just seems like it's all about the headlines. Unfortunately, we'll keep you up to date on that story because it is changing all the time. And there's going to be a lot of court procedures here, as you mentioned. So we'll keep our eye on that one.
Yeah. And I think it's just not going to go away because we're in an election year. So it's just going to continue on until maybe the election ends in November. But stay tuned, guys.
Okay, Brooke, Forbes Advisor just announced their cities with the worst drivers. Where do you think Houston finished? Now, before you give me your answer, it examined factors like accidents due to distracted drivers, accidents due to speeding, fatalities due to drunk drivers, and 2 other categories. Where do you think Houston finished? I know we think they finished number 1. Yeah. We did not finish number 1 as the worst city. Who do you think finished 1?
I really wanted to say number 1, but I knew that was going to be the most obvious answer. So maybe we're like, maybe we're number 3 or 4. But look, I was talking to a New York City person the other day, and they're like, I'm from New York City native, and Houston is worse than New York City. They were telling me that. So we're even lower than number 3 or 4.
So there are 2 Texas cities in the top 10. Houston is not one of them. I'll give you number 1. This is shocking. Albuquerque, New Mexico, which scored a total 100 out of 100. It does look at per 100,000 residents. So, again, this is all on a scale, right? But Albuquerque was the worst city with the worst drivers. Now, I'm a big fan of Albuquerque. I love going there. I've never found their drivers to be horrible. Like, it is totally fine there. In fact, it's so easy to drive over there. So Albuquerque was number one. Can you believe that?
I can't believe that at all. I'm like, LA? Like, where's LA? I don't understand.
No, LA didn't even make the top 10. So I
What?
think a lot of cities with traffic actually didn't crack this list, because when you're looking at accidents, at speeding, distracted drivers, we're always in traffic, so we're not going that fast, right? Like, we just have terrible drivers who are rude and mean. But Memphis finished number 2, Detroit number 3, Tucson, Arizona 4, Kansas City 5. Here's the first Texas city. Dallas came in at number 6, and
Okay.
Fort Worth, which is the cousin, finished at number 9.
Well, if Dallas is going to get any like shade, then that's fine. I'm fine with Dallas being in the worst list, but I'm like, I just can't believe Houston didn't make it. Dallas, though, to me, it's really scary to drive.
Yes.
Something about the freeways in Dallas, like I feel like I'm going to get into an accident, so I'm not surprised. But still, Houston didn't make it. That's shocking.
Houston finished, are you ready? Drum roll, please. Number 23.
What?
I know.
This was inaccurate, y'all. This is not.
Number 23. We have to stop throwing shade at our city.
No.
We're the 23rd worst place to drive.
No, I passed by an accident this morning. Like, we are definitely way higher than that. That's one of the main things people always talk about with Houston. Like, I don't want to live there because I hear the traffic's terrible. We can say we're number 23.
Yeah. Well, we still have terrible traffic, right? Both things can be true. We can have terrible traffic, and we don't have to have the worst drivers. We have the 23rd worst drivers in the city. So there you go.
But we have terrible drivers. We do.
Okay, let's do our Only in H-Town. This is my favorite part of the week. Only in H-Town. What do you got for us, Brooke?
Okay, so my story is going to show why Houston restaurant scene could have its own reality show. Like, I'm just saying, I'm just throwing it out there. But over the weekend, Houstonians were waiting in line for food, which is, no surprises there. But the place where they were waiting is pretty funny. So they were waiting for char-grilled oysters on Almeda Road, right across the street from Turkey Leg Hut. Which the interesting part of the story is that the Turkey Leg Hut owner, one of the owners, Lynn Price, was fired less than a month ago. But he set up a little pop-up oyster shop right across the street from the restaurant, and it was a hit. There were people waiting in line. It's a New Orleans-based oyster shop called Tiger to the Dozen. And I mean, Lynn Price was like, I'm just gonna sell oysters here. But I think the funniest thing is that there's still a question mark as to what his relationship is with Turkey Leg Hut right now, because a customer actually said in this Houston Chronicle story that they saw Price going back and forth between Turkey Leg Hut and the pop-up throughout the day. And the customer said that when she asked Price if he was still with Turkey Leg Hut, he just smiled. So it was just like...
Okay, this is wild, because the last time we heard about the Turkey Leg Hut, Aunt Rochelle was updating us on everything happened. As you mentioned, Lynn is no longer with the Turkey Leg Hut, and it started off as a married couple who made it big with this awesome restaurant. Then there was a divorce. There were a lot of allegations. There's a restraining order. Then there was money not being spent correctly, paychecks not being given to employees. Then the firing came down last month. And now he's popping up across the street, setting up an oyster pop-up, and still going back and forth. This is wild. This is only in H-Town.
It is only in H-Town. And also, I love that Houstonians are like, I'm here for it. I'm going to stand in this 2 to 3 hour line for these oysters and maybe even go to Turkey Leg Hut after. Like, I don't really care. I'm just here for the good food and the good drama. Like, it's so funny.
Yeah, this is so funny and so wild. Oh my gosh, you're right. We need a reality show here in Houston on just the restaurants themselves.
Yes.
Okay, only in H-Town does it become a big story that an art car museum is closing. Well, if you haven't heard, this is sad news, but as of right now, the historic Montrose Museum is closing in April after this year's Art Car Museum parade, after the deaths of co-founders Anna O'Connor Williams Heritis in 2021 and then her husband James in 2023. So there are talks within local and regional art organizations to somehow keep the legacy of the Art Car Museum alive, and maybe the building and the museum itself. But this is so sad to hear because this is such a big part of the Houston culture now for the last 25 plus years.
Yeah, I'm like, what's going to happen to the art car parade? It's such a Houston tradition. Everyone looks forward to it. So I'm hoping it's still going to stay alive, even though the founders are no longer going to have the museum.
Yeah, I hope it does stay alive, right? Somehow, some way, because this is what makes Houston so cool and
Yes.
quirky and really gives our art scene this like North Pole almost, right? Like where we can be sophisticated, but we can also be quirky with this
Right.
art car parade that brings everybody out and just creates this really cool culture and spirit of the arts here. So I hope it stays alive somehow, some way.
Yeah, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed because it's like one of those things that I just don't want Houston to lose because it really does sum up Houston. It's quirkiness, it's fun, it's colorful. It's a great time.
We'll see what happens with that one. But yeah, only in H-Town are we going to talk about the Art Car Museum. And that's what we're doing. Brooke, that was a lot of fun. Have a great week. And make sure everyone that's listening right now, subscribe to Hey Houston because you're doing a great job and you are putting out some awesome content. So please, everyone, if you are listening right now, go to the show notes or just go to our website, houston.citycast.fm. Brooke, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. And yes, read the newsletter.
Once again, that was Brooke Lewis. You can find all the stories we talked about in our show notes. And while you're there, give us your thoughts on all the stories that we talked about with the contact info there, or send it to us on Instagram at CityCastHouston. That will do it for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. And sorry, Carly, you're gonna have to edit out all these coughs and sniffs and
It's because the pollen, everything's so bad.
it
It's
really
so
is.
bad.
Like it's just yellow outside in our area. Woosah. I'm good.